Ladies and gentlemen, grab your popcorn, tighten your wallets, and brace yourselves for another episode of Boss Economics World, the only place where we rip through the government's economic playbook like a hot knife through butter, exposing the circus of mismanagement, reckless spending, and sheer incompetence that's driving our economy straight into the dumpster fire of recession. Today, we're diving headfirst into the latest economic clown show coming out of Washington, Donald Trump's $3.3 trillion tax and spending bill, aka the legislative equivalent of a bad reality TV reboot. Spoiler alert, it's a hot mess, and we're here to break down every juicy detail, from the surface-level political drama to the deep-rooted economic disasters lurking beneath. Now, if you've been following along with us here at Boss Economics World, you know our shtick. We don't just report the news, we satire the heck out of it, shining a spotlight on the government's mismanagement that's got us all teetering on the edge of an economic abyss. And folks, this bill is a textbook case of everything wrong with Washington's approach to fixing the economy. So, let's put on our economist hats, grab the latest data, and dissect this beast layer by layer, starting with the surface-level political theater and working our way down to the core economic issues threatening your wallet, your job, and your future. Buckle up, because it's gonna be a wild ride. First up, let's talk about the drama unfolding in the Senate, where Republican leaders are scrambling to scrounge up votes for Trump's $3.3 trillion tax and spending bill like a bunch of desperate reality TV contestants fighting over the last immunity idol. Senate Majority Leader John Thune is out here sweating bullets, trying to corral his party into passing what's supposed to be the crowning jewel of Trump's domestic agenda. But here's the kicker, with 8 major Republican holdouts and only 3 defections allowed, Thune's walking a tightrope over a pit of political alligators. And let me tell you, folks, those alligators are hungry. You've got heavyweights like Rand Paul and Tom Tillis digging in their heels, saying, "No way, Jose," to this monstrosity of a bill. And then there's the amendment circus. Dozens of changes being proposed, from energy policy tweaks to healthcare provisions, all threatening to turn the Republican Party into a circular firing squad. Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer is just sitting back, sipping his coffee, and laughing as he says, the Republicans are still in disarray. And honestly, Chuck, you're not wrong, this is a clown car with a flat tire, and it's careening straight toward a brick wall. But here's where the satire kicks in, folks. While Thune is out here playing whack-a-mole with his own party, Trump is reportedly in contact with lawmakers, acting like some sort of deal-making wizard. Oh, please. This is the same guy who thinks negotiation means tweeting all caps rants at 3 a.m. And let's not forget Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, who's apparently optimistic that the Senate will pass this bill by Friday. Optimistic? Scott, my man, I'm optimistic that my cat will learn to fetch my slippers, but that doesn't mean it's gonna happen. Now, before we dive deeper, let's take a step back and ask the million-dollar question, or, in this case, the $3.3 trillion question, what's actually in this bill, and why is it causing such a ruckus? And more importantly, how is this government mismanagement setting us up for an economic disaster of epic proportions? Let's peel back the layers, folks, because the devil's in the details, and the details are screaming, recession alert. First up on our economic autopsy table, the clean energy provisions, or as I like to call them, how to tank an industry while pretending to save the planet. Now, if you've been paying attention to the global economy, you know that clean energy is one of the fastest growing sectors, projected to create millions of jobs and drive innovation. According to the International Energy Agency, IEA, global clean energy investment reached $1.7 trillion in 2023, and it's expected to hit $2 trillion by 2030. Meanwhile, here in the US, the clean energy sector employed over 3.3 million workers in 2024, outpacing fossil fuel jobs by a factor of 3, per the US Department of Energy. So, what does the Trump administration do? They decide to gut the subsidies for wind and solar projects, slapping on a new excise tax for projects using components from China and other foreign entities of concern. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a valid debate to be had about supply chain security and reducing reliance on foreign manufacturing. But here's the rub, 80% of solar panel components and 60% of wind turbine parts used in the US are imported, according to the American Clean Power Association. So, by slapping on these taxes, you're not just punishing China, you're punishing American businesses, jacking up costs, and killing jobs. Bravo, Washington. And then there's the amendment drama, with Senator Joni Ernst pushing to soften the phase out of these subsidies and ease the requirements for clean energy tax credits. On the surface, this sounds like a win for the industry, but fiscal conservatives are clutching their pearls, crying about deficits. Here's the satire, folks, these are the same conservatives who cheer when we cut taxes for billionaires, but the second we talk about investing in a sector that could actually grow the economy, they're suddenly concerned about the budget. Oh, the hypocrisy. Meanwhile, the US is falling behind China, which invested $546 billion in clean energy in 2023, more than double what the US spent, per Bloomberg NEF. So, while we're busy arguing over amendments, China's eating our lunch in the clean energy race. Well done, Washington, another gold star for mismanagement. Next up, let's talk about rural hospitals, because nothing screams economic leadership like letting critical healthcare infrastructure collapse while pretending a few $billion will fix it. Senator Susan Collins is out here fighting the good fight, proposing an amendment to double the rural hospital fund to $50 billion. Sounds great, right? Except here's the catch, this bill also includes massive Medicaid cuts, which are projected to force rural hospitals to close at an even faster rate. According to the Center for Healthcare Quality and Payment Reform, 40% of rural hospitals were already operating at a loss in 2024, and over 150 have closed since 2010. And guess what? Medicaid cuts will only make it worse, because rural hospitals rely on Medicaid for 40% of their revenue, per the Kaiser Family Foundation. Now, let's satire this up. The government's solution to this crisis is to throw $50 billion at the problem while simultaneously slashing the funding that keeps these hospitals alive. It's like giving someone a band-aid for a gunshot wound and then shooting them again for good measure. And here's the kicker, Collins wants to pay for this by raising taxes on individuals earning over $25 million a year. Oh, the horror. You mean we might actually ask the ultra-wealthy to pay their fair share to keep rural America from turning into a healthcare desert? Cue the violins for the billionaires, folks, because apparently, their tax breaks are more important than your grandma's access to an emergency room. And let's not forget the broader economic impact. When rural hospitals close, entire communities suffer. Jobs disappear, businesses shutter, and property values tank. According to a 2023 study by the National Rural Health Association, every dollar spent by a rural hospital generates $2.30 in economic activity. So, by letting these hospitals die, Washington isn't just failing rural America, they're setting off a domino effect that could deepen the recession they're already brewing with their reckless fiscal policies. Speaking of reckless, let's dive into the Medicaid cuts, because nothing says compassionate conservatism like kicking millions of low-income Americans off their health insurance. A group of conservative senators, led by Ron Johnson and Rick Scott, are pushing an amendment to roll back the Medicaid expansion under the Affordable Care Act. Now, let's be real, the ACA isn't perfect, but it's provided coverage to over 20 million Americans, many of whom are working poor families. According to the Congressional Budget Office, CBO, rolling back Medicaid expansion could strip coverage from 15 million people by 2030, driving up uninsured rates and healthcare costs across the board. Here's where the satire kicks in, these senators are out here preaching fiscal responsibility, but let's look at the numbers, shall we? The CBO estimates that the $3.3 trillion bill will increase the federal deficit by $1.5 trillion over the next decade, thanks to massive tax cuts for corporations and the wealthy. So, apparently, it's fine to blow a hole in the budget for your billionaire donors, but when it comes to helping working families afford health care, suddenly we're broke. Oh, the irony. And let's not forget the economic fallout, uninsured Americans are less likely to seek preventive care, leading to higher rates of chronic illness, lost productivity, and, you guessed it, more strain on an already teetering economy. According to a 2024 study by the Urban Institute, every dollar cut from Medicaid results in a $2.50 loss in economic activity. So, congratulations, Washington, you're not just screwing over the poor, you're screwing over the entire economy. Now, let's zoom out and connect the dots, because all of these issues, clean energy cuts, rural hospital closures, Medicaid rollbacks, are just symptoms of a deeper disease, government mismanagement that's pushing us straight into a recession. According to the Federal Reserve's latest projections, GDP growth is expected to slow to 1.8% in 2025, down from 2.5% in 2024, thanks to rising interest rates, persistent inflation, and, drumroll, please, fiscal policies that prioritize short-term political wins over long-term economic stability. And let's not forget the debt ceiling drama looming on the horizon, with the U.S. national debt hitting $34 trillion in 2024, per the U.S. Treasury Department. With interest payments on that debt projected to exceed $1 trillion annually by 2026, we're spending more on debt servicing than on education, infrastructure, or healthcare combined. Sound sustainable to you? Yeah, me neither. And here's the satire, folks, while Washington is busy arguing over amendments and tax cuts, the average American is getting crushed. Real wages have stagnated, with inflation outpacing wage growth by 1.2% in 2024, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Meanwhile, consumer debt hit a record $17.5 trillion in 2024, per the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, as families struggle to keep up with rising costs. So, while Trump and his cronies pat themselves on the back for fixing the economy, the rest of us are out here choosing between groceries and rent. Thanks, Washington, you're doing a bang-up job. So, what's the takeaway, folks? This $3.3 trillion bill isn't just a political soap opera, it's a masterclass in economic mismanagement, a shining example of how to take a struggling economy and drive it straight into the ground. From gutting clean energy to slashing healthcare, Washington is doubling down on policies that kill jobs, widen inequality, and deepen the recession they're pretending to fix. And the saddest part? They're doing it all while claiming to put America first. Well, I don't know about you, but I don't think first means first in line for an economic collapse. Here at Boss Economics World, we're calling on you, our financially savvy audience, our everyday workers, and our finance professionals, to hold these clowns accountable. Share this video, call your senators, and demand policies that actually grow the economy, not just the bank accounts of the ultra-wealthy. Because if we don't, the only thing $3.3 trillion will buy us is a one-way ticket to economic ruin. Until next time, folks, stay sharp, stay skeptical, and remember, when it comes to Washington's economic playbook, it's all smoke, mirrors, and a whole lot of mismanagement. This is Boss Economics World, signing off.